Hi, I'm Julia, and this is a library card education, and today I'm going to give you my initial thoughts on Masterbooks curriculum called Introduction to Forensic Science for grades 11 through 12. I came across this sometime in November when my daughter was going through an anatomy course, phase, something, I don't know what you call it. She was binging all things anatomy back then, and I was scrambling to find things to keep her occupied and to keep her challenged. She is my gifted girl. She can read at a very high level. She's well into the collegiate reading level, but she's not there emotionally. So I had questions about this, and I started trying to find answers for my questions in the last couple of months. And I couldn't find anything on Facebook and YouTube other than you need to have emotional maturity. You need to be older because there are things that are discussed in this book that you wouldn't want a child to see. Well, I want to know what those things are, because just because someone says that, I want to know what these examples are. I want to be able to decide for myself, is this right for my child? Is this right for our home? And after going through it these last few days, I can say without a doubt that yes, this should be given to a 10th, 11th, 12th grade child, someone that is far more mature. It doesn't dive into the nitty-gritty of these cases, but it's enough that you don't want to give that to your middle schooler. So let's flip this around. You can see inside both the teacher guide and the student guide, and then I'll give you my perspective and my thoughts from the notes that I took over the last couple of days. First up, we have the student book. Again, it's Introduction to Forensic Science from Masterbooks. Here's your table of contents. Pause it if you want to read more carefully. I'm going to skip ahead to lesson 3. Kaylee Anthony. Now, I'm in my early 40s, so if you are my age or older, most of these cases in here you're going to have some knowledge of. I'm not going to read through this just because I don't know what YouTube's restrictions are. But if you know Kaylee Anthony, you know what the story is. This has to do with children. So again, one of the considerations to take into account. Let's go to the next lesson that I wanted to give some perspective with. O.J. Simpson and Nicole Brown Simpson. Again, if you were a child of the 80s and 90s, you know this. You probably watched it on TV as it happened. I know I remember seeing The Chase with the White Bronco. Domestic violence, and I'm not going to read that out loud. Michael Jackson. Things to note. So here it says, a few years later in 1993, Jackson was accused of inappropriate behavior with minors. And it goes on to detail some of that and some of his drug abuse. And then it goes on to talk about how he was in debt. They attempted rehabilitation, and it gives the timeline of the medications that were administered to him prior to his death. Lady in the Box. This is another one where it doesn't go into detail, but if you know the terms, you know the terms. So I'll just read it. Janice took a job at a nightclub as a dancer. I think all of us understand what that means. Probably not something you want to have to explain to your younger child, but a 10th, 11th, 12th grade child either knows what that is or should be understanding what it's time for them to understand what that means as they're about to head off into the world. And then you can see right here, I don't know if that's something I'm allowed to say on YouTube, but it quite literally gives you the various types and what it looks like. And it's just a bird, so it's not a human in that respect, but it gives you Gives you a little bit of food for thought there. Again, it continues on. And here, make note of that. That's a very famous one. And then it comes down in here, giving a timeline. It is a cleaned up version of the timeline, but it's still a timeline nonetheless. You can hear a noise in my background. It is extremely windy here today and my wind chimes are blowing. And it goes into shoe print patterns. So I'll just go through this a little bit more quickly. And notice the image and what that is exactly. If you can, I don't know if I can zoom in. Can you see what that is? And again, probably not something you're gonna want your young child to be seeing. So if they've ever read about the gangsters, they have that. And here. Ted Bundy. That's what this case study is, lesson 30. And dental identification. If you are familiar with his case and why dental identification would be necessary, you have to glean from that. Here's a picture. If you're not familiar with his case, it gives, again, a short timeline. It does not go into the salacious, into the dramatic, into the overly gruesome details, but it gives you a condensed, cleaned up version. It's not a made for TV sort of timeline, but it is it's enough for you to, again, I have a 12-year-old daughter, and right here it talks of a 12-year-old girl, not images I want to put into her little head. And on the topic of teeth and teeth impressions, thought this one was interesting, as it's been in the news recently that they suspect Hitler escaped the suicide or the offing attempt that he had, and in his place was a female body. So again, it discusses all of those things in here and how they can identify male versus female, but that they suspect, based on biological evidence, he was actually in Argentina. So if you want to do a conspiracy theorist sort of investigation, deep dive into history, that one would tie into that one. Just an idea. And we'll finish this off real quick. And then it has terms and definitions. And now just a quick flip through of the teacher guide. It's a lot of fill in the blank. That is my one not really happy about choice that they made. I would have liked some opportunities for my child to grapple with answering these questions without having a statistical probability of answering a question correctly. And there is a term for that, but that escapes me at this time. So your answer key is in the back. You have all of your lab lists, materials needed for each individual lab. So this includes lab courses throughout, lab work throughout. Yeah, like, you may not want your child to see a trajectory of a certain projectile that comes out of a certain type of a thing aiming at a individual. And that is that. So some of the things that I took notes on, and I have it here, so I'll be looking back and forth. What struck me about this particular science course was that it has links and tie-ins to every other science that you would have in high school: physical, chemistry, physics, biology, and earth science. It really is a complementary course. You can use it as an elective or as a full year course. Some of the specifics, it has projectile types and sizes, handwriting analysis, types of paper, ink, printing tools, including typewriters and its typeset, data collection, erasing of data for the computers, internet paper trails, DNA profiles, DNA types found within the world. That would be human, all living creatures, and you're working with the collection and history of the DNA. You have blood type and collection, body fluids, including reproductive, if you catch my drift. The body fluid splatter. Again, don't know what YouTube will flag, so I need to be a little careful. And this is done through a lab of paint demonstrations. You have toxicology, anthropology, biological sex identification from bones, identification of ethnicity from bones, and how insects help with the investigations, including the history, the types of life cycles of, etc., including pictures of bugs with the bugs on things. Again, catch my drift. Collecting and transporting of said individuals. Fingerprints has its own chapter, then animal fingerprints has its own chapter, and a third chapter is then goes into detail of the fingerprint processing, the types of surfaces, and processing techniques based upon those various types, dusting preservation, hair and trace evidence, hair types and growth, human versus animal, and ethnicity. We have glass and evidence collecting, soil types, composition properties, botany examinations, foot and shoe prints, fire evidence, including crimes of fire, facial reconstruction, dental records, criminal psychology, court system, and courtroom testimonies. It gives detail without sensationalizing, dramatizing. It is age appropriate for the 11th through 12th grade, as an age appropriate, not for my 7th grader. It does not deep dive into the individual cases like I had mentioned earlier with Ted Bundy. You're not going to get the Lifetime Movie Network. You're not going to get 2020 or Dateline ID channel. You're going to get a cleaned up but a concise timeline of what to expect, or what was brain fart. A timeline of the events of the crimes, or the crime, whatever, you get it. I'm tired. It does have your faith interwoven on every page. The big thing that I noticed was human dignity and respect and dignity of all persons and personhood, as God created us from conception through your last moments here on earth. It is very respectful while pulling back the curtain for older students. So my questions were answered. This will be something we will do in many years to come. I will keep this on my shelf. I think it's an excellent course. This is something I would have loved to do in high school. It would make an excellent elective. It would make an excellent year of science, especially if you have a child that doesn't want to go into medicine, but they need those 3 or 4 years of sciences filled. It also will work really well for children that want to go into STEAM or STEM fields. My daughter vacillates between ER nurse, nurse practitioner, coroner, which is why we got started on this little venture, and an emergency room doctor. So somewhere in there, we'll see. For all I know, she can end up being a dog groomer. But for now, that's where her little heart beats. And we have to keep in mind that there are professions that would benefit from this. If you have a child going into nursing, there is forensic nursing. I've learned about that in the recent years, and them working with living victims, evidence collection, taking their testimony, preparing them to speak to investigators and police officers. They have a huge role in a lot of the criminal evidence collection that you would find in this course. It's not just for individuals that want to work in law enforcement or at the coroner's office. There are many professions that would benefit from having this course. It looks like it's really fun. If she, for some reason, is no longer interested in a few years, I will end up using it because it's really fun. But again, take that into consideration, and hopefully it answers some of the questions that you've had. It piques your curiosity, but you can choose this with more understanding, to not scandalize your child and unnecessarily expose them to things of this world that their little hearts and minds are not yet prepared for. We need to be very mindful of that. I'm grateful for Masterbooks for making this course. I am not sponsored. Obviously, this is only my second video, so of course I'm not sponsored. But I'm glad that somebody is taking this on and they are using it they have prepared it in a God-centered light. It is such a hard topic, and it is so very needed to find God in everything, even in the worst of things. And if you like this, subscribe, give me a thumbs up, and I'll see you next time.